Hello, it's Debbie Gilbert here from the Business Awards Show, and I'm also the founder of the Best Business Women Awards. And today I am joined by Victoria Rennoldson, who is a global leadership coach. Her business, Culture Cuppa, has now been going for 10 years. She transitioned from corporate life 10 years ago and has been a real trailblazer in the coaching industry. She has a podcast called Culture Communication Confidence, and she's also about to release her first book, which she's going to tell us all about today. So we're going to be talking about Victoria's business journey and her awards journey, because she is a finalist in the Best Business Women Awards this year. So welcome, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And I'm really excited to be here, really excited to also be a finalist. So thank you so much.
Fabulous. So let's start off by talking about what on earth made you transition into the world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because I don't think I ever really saw that as my path initially. I was very much firmly in corporate life. I worked in brand marketing and I worked in the food industry. I absolutely loved my job. I was regularly trying out new recipes, developing new ideas for product launches and communication campaigns. And it was a really exciting world. And until it wasn't. And I kind of worked in that world for 12 years. And I was regularly working with different people around the world. I was based in London, but regularly traveling across Europe and working with colleagues and teams in the US and Asia. And I just kind of got to a point when I suddenly realized it wasn't my path anymore. What I had thought was going to be true, that I was going to be that global leader, that I was going to keep kind of going for those promotions and going for it. It just didn't satisfy me anymore. I just wasn't excited by it anymore.
Mm.
And it was a real shock. It was a real shock. And it coincided, as it does for many sort of, I think, women and parents, with the space of starting a family, having children, and getting really clear with myself around what is it that I want work to represent for me? What is the purpose of me getting up each day and going to work? Particularly if I'm going to sort of leave my child and go and leave them in childcare and go and do that work. And that was a really big crisis, I'd say, of identity to kind of go, well, what is it I'm going to be doing here? So that is like the background to it and the context to it, but it was a real shock at that moment. Yeah, was very, very unexpected. So
So what made you pick
yeah.
coaching? I'm interested to know.
Yeah. So I think, for me, it was actually more about the type of coaching that I do. So the space that I'm in is really around global leadership, but specifically thinking about where communication meets culture. And these threads have always been through my life. So I have always loved languages. I studied them at school and university and lived abroad. I traveled really regularly in my first career. And I was always really curious and interested in how people communicate, how they have conversations, how they interact with each other. And I realized probably quite early on that there's always this cultural dynamic to how people express themselves, whether that's driven by their nationality, where they live, their heritage, their background, or other types of culture, like working and talking to people in finance is really different to working and talking to people who work in creative agencies. They communicate in really different ways. So I'd always be really fascinated by this idea of the cultural aspects of communication. And I felt there was something in that that wasn't really being addressed, either in the corporate world or in the world of coaching. And so I got really interested in, okay, how do I help people in this space? Help people who are on that journey, wanting to step up as global leaders, but wanting to kind of think about how they can really adjust their communication and be better as a communicator with their own teams around the world.
Mm. So what sort of challenges do you think leaders face with communication? I mean, it's a massive topic, but what are the sort of front of mind things that come to your mind?
Yeah. So I find, the kinds of challenges that come up is that people, the kinds of people that I work with are fantastic at what they do. They really are usually already sort of middle managers, sometimes already a senior manager or leader. And they've obviously been very successful in their career to date. So they've got experience, expertise, knowledge, qualifications. But the thing that they are struggling with is they realize they're not speaking like a leader, they're not communicating like a leader. And that might be, for example, to do with confidence. They may have really big challenges around speaking up and in certain contexts. They may have challenges with influence, how they're able to get stakeholders to align across an agenda. But it also might be that they're finding themselves as the leader of a team, and this is obviously increasingly in the last few years, who are everywhere around the world. And they've got to somehow bring that team together to get behind the vision and the purpose, deliver great work, but they never see each other in person. So
Mm,
they have to do this, virtually through the box that we live in, somehow build that connection when they're not seeing those people regularly. They
mm,
don't have those opportunities for the conversations, the small talk, the light touch, and build the kind of getting to know each other. And somehow they've got to be able to do that as well. So it's a tough environment. There are loads of challenges there in lots of different kind of aspects of their leadership.
mm. And are you working with people in person and online?
I
Mixture?
am.
Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I love both. And this was the really surprising thing for me, Debbie. Like when I went into this work, I did it fully in person when I set up the business 10 years ago. And I was zooming all over London and building up a team of freelancers to help me do that work. And it was exhausting. And then COVID came, and of course, had to totally shift the
mm,
business model, which was also really exciting. But my initial reaction, really honestly, was I don't think I can do this virtually. I just don't see how I can build a rapport with working with people one to one, but also I facilitate team workshops as well in this space. And I really didn't feel like I was going to be able to do it. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to build that same connection. But really weirdly, what I've discovered about myself, and that's something I'm always keen to push my boundaries on, is what can I develop and grow
mm,
myself? But what I learned was actually, I'm really good at this without sounding big headed, but I'm really good at the virtual facilitation, the virtual connection. So I work now both one to one with people, with teams. I do it in person in the UK, but also around the world, but also virtually as well. And I like both. They're very, very different, but I do like both.
And do you think, as a society, since the pandemic, we've got better at online meetings, relationships, that kind of thing?
People got very aware of it, right, in the
Mm,
early days, and therefore there were lots of ideas and tips and strategies of how to
mm,
do it better. But
mm,
I think really, like my personal point of view on this is that actually now it's become more kind of usual. Like, so if I take the UK, like most people probably would be, the average I hear is working in the office or in a workplace 3 days a week. I'm working from home maybe 2 days a week.
mm,
But actually, because this is now kind of reality, I find that people are not in very good habits. So what I'm hearing increasingly is, I'm presenting a presentation and somebody's telling me this story and everybody has their screen off, video off, and I can't see anybody. And it's like talking to a black hole.
yeah.
So the ways of working, the best practice have existed. People are probably in sort of bad habits now. And it's really challenging, particularly if you're that leader of people or you're trying to influence, say, senior stakeholders, and you just can't see those people. And, such a key part of communication, and what I'm a great believer in, is that communication isn't just like the words we're saying, it's how you're showing up, the energy you're projecting, the way that you lean into the conversation. And it's everything like how you look at the camera, your eye contact, your hand gestures, your expressiveness. And we're all individual in how we do that. And there are real cultural nuances on how you do that. So, the way that I express myself with, say, people when I'm talking in the UK might be really different from how I'm doing it when I'm leading a team workshop with, say, majority of Japanese people. I have to really kind of
Mm,
adapt. But I think, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of bad habits around.
mm,
People are quite disconnected in the virtual space. So it takes quite a bit of effort. both as somebody who's trying to influence, but also to think about, if you are part of a meeting, participating, how do you communicate effectively? How do you build connection and relationships?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting topic, this. So
Mm.
let's talk about the challenges of running a business. So you're 10 years down the line, which is, a long time. And you'll know that a high proportion of businesses fail in the first 5 years. That's a fact. So to get to 10 years, you're definitely winning. So what sort of challenges have you come across and how have you dealt with those?
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I said right at the beginning, I never thought this was going to be my path. So it was a bit of a surprise to end up thinking, right, this is what I'm doing. And I have to be honest, like the early days, I was like, well, I've worked in marketing, I worked in business for, 12 years. I think I know what I'm doing here. And the reality of being an entrepreneur, being your own boss, your own team, sitting in your own workspace or at home, running the business, it's so different. So the nature of my work is very, I would say, social, in the sense that I'm constantly meeting people, whether that's to do with my clients, potential clients, and certainly networking. But that's really different from being in part of a team, being part of a structure. And I always worked for very large global organizations. So I'd always had a very big structure around me, whether that was back office or training and development, or even sort of team away days and things like this. And I was like rudderless initially. I realized really quickly I got my sort of first few clients, but then I realized you've got to get then the next clients and the next clients. And I realized there was so much I didn't know. And that was quite a shock to kind of go, oh, I thought I knew about running businesses. This is really interesting. I don't. And I think one of my earliest lessons, and this would be, something I'd always share with somebody who's either early days in business or even in the first few years, I think I got a mentor, and that was really critical to me and my development, to have a different perspective, somebody to talk to. I then later on got into networking, and networking for me was an incredibly important part of having my support network. So I've been part of many different networks, groups over the years, um, both in, I suppose, more kind of, B2C space, but also in B2B and more corporate space as well. And they all have their place. But for me, also finding the right network for you is really important. And what I realized early on with my networking strategies, it wasn't about necessarily selling to the others within the group. Actually, it was really unusual for me to directly get business that way. But my networking was absolutely about support, friendship, but also being able to tap into asking questions, getting help from other people, helping other people. And in fact, today, one of the very first early networks I joined, which is many, many years ago now, like 7 years ago, I'm still working with people that I met in those very early days. Like, that's how strong my relationships and connections have been. So I think that's also been really important part of my, dealing with the challenges of running a business. And the challenges of really kind of understanding not only how do you launch a business, but how do you grow it and scale it and get it to the next level.
And so do you do a mixture of online networking and in-person networking?
I do, yeah. I think both have their place and they're both really important. But I'm also, I feel quite strongly, it's not just about going to a meeting and collecting business cards or QR codes for LinkedIn as it is these days. For me, it is actually much more valuable to have follow up, to have conversations, to follow people. My main social media platform is LinkedIn. I follow people there, I interact with what they're doing. And I think, that's really important, really, because otherwise it's just a numbers exercise. For me, this is much more about quality conversations and quality relationships. And, for me, it's also about not only, how can somebody else help me, but how can I help them? Like, what is it that I can maybe help with, whether it's directly with my services or whether it's with introductions, connections, or sources of information, even.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things, isn't it? It's just being able to,
Mm,
to reach out to people, get advice, get information about things that can really help your business, which kind of
mm.
brings me on to awards, really. So,
Yes.
when did you first become aware of business awards? Were you already aware of it in the corporate world, or?
Yeah. I was kind of vaguely aware of it, Debbie, from, I could see that every year there'd be a big kind of hurrah on say LinkedIn or on Instagram, and people be like, hey, I've kind of won this award. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. But bizarrely, I never really kind of thought about it for me. And in fact, I have to thank initially my first award I won last year, but initially I got very encouraged by somebody who's been very important for my support and growth and development in the last 12 months, who is Emphys Maloney.
Hmm.
And I sort of, she has been my mentor and coach. I'm happy to share, and she's been very encouraging of me. And what I realized was that I'd sort of seen it as I'd love celebrating other people's wins and celebrating like those moments with them, but I felt almost a little bit like, was I being too arrogant by blowing my own trumpet in that way? Was I being too, I don't know, just sort of too showy offy. It's not a word, but you know what I mean. And I kind of realized though, through the conversations, through understanding about awards better, that actually, no, it wasn't about that at all. In fact, going back to my corporate days, there were ways that in corporate days, I had a performance contract. I measured my performance against objectives. I knew that if I did well, that I'd be rewarded. And there were lots of moments during the year, which were celebrations, whether that was year end or whether that was at the end of the year, of the budget year. There were lots of moments where people came together or you individually were celebrated for achieving great things. And you don't have that when you're a business owner, an entrepreneur. So that was where it really sort of came home to me that this idea of awards is absolutely a critical part of you celebrating yourself and saying,
Yeah.
wow, look how far I've come.
So what made you enter the Best Business Women Awards out of interest?
Yeah, so this was one that I'd seen last year, and I realized, actually, do you know what? That would be really great to kind of get involved in. And what I found very, very helpful as being a total newbie to the awards and applying for the first time was that I had realized that there was lots of support to enter the awards. So initially it was a little bit sort of intimidating almost. I was like, oh my goodness, I've got to answer all these questions. But then I realized how much support there was. And I very much, watched the videos, listened to judges sharing previous winners, and that was, I have to say, Debbie, amazing. So thank you to you for sort of sharing all that information, because you made it very easy in some ways. You made it very easy to say, look, this is what makes a really great award entry. And this is, what you need to be aware of. This is how you should approach it or think about approaching it. And of course, I had to do the hard work and put it together and get all the evidence and data. But that made it super easy. And ultimately, what I really also was very important to me is I've seen sort of other awards out there where you ask for votes, and that felt really uncomfortable to me. I really didn't want to go to my audience and say, hey, vote for me, and that's how I'm going to win this. I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted to be acknowledged and, judged and told, actually, you've won on your own merit.
Yeah, I'm not, everyone knows this. I'm not a fan of voting at all, because I think that becomes a popularity contest. That isn't a true measure of how good you are at what you do. Because if you've got a large social media following or even a big family, you could end up winning an award that actually isn't really, based on that merits of what you've
Mm.
achieved. Um, so, with the Golden Peacock Awards, you won this award last year, and that's very much again based on what you've achieved. So, how did that feel, and what has that brought to your business already for you?
Mm. Well, that award I won last November, and we're sort of recording this. I suppose it's almost like 10 months on, and for me, that was really quite an unbelievable moment to kind of realize that I'd actually, won it. It'd been judged for, and actually, this had been something I won on my own merit. I think the thing that I realized very quickly was that this was incredibly important for my reputation, which is
Mm,
why I wanted to really enter credible awards. So that meant, therefore, I could put that title, for example, my LinkedIn profile. I could talk to my clients and prospective clients about it. And that gave me extra I suppose, credibility, extra weighting.
Mm.
And not to say that I haven't got that, because I've got the experience and I've got lots of great clients I can case studies I can talk about. But for me, it's adding that extra layer. To say that I am an award-winning coach is really something different. And I think it, for me, it also, the moment when my name was read out loud, and to feel that moment of total joy and ecstasy of, wow, I've done this, and celebrating that moment in that evening. Like, for me, that's so important, because I'm sure I'm like many business owners where it's always about the next idea, the next actions, and you're always constantly running. And it's really hard sometimes to stop, pause, to look backwards and say, actually, what did happen there? And what worked and what was really great about it? And to recognize it, to fully acknowledge myself. And so for me, that was really what I got from it. It was such an amazing feeling, but also a really important part of me kind of being my own boss and being the CEO of myself and acknowledging myself.
Amazing. So let's talk about your book. You have the first book coming out. And I love the way when we talked before, you said my first book, which made me think that maybe there might be another one at some stage. But tell us about your book and tell us what it's all about and when it launches.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Debbie. So first of all, I am over the moon to be finally getting this book to launch. For anybody who's listening or watching, who's written a book, who's an author, I mean, you know how long it takes. So it's
Yeah.
been something that's been on my mind for an incredibly long time. I've been wanting to write a book for many, many years, and it was sort of sitting there on my vision board on the side there. And I'd always get to the end of the year and go, oh, it didn't happen. Like, oh, how annoying. I must make it happen next year. But, what was really instrumental to me was getting the right support and help. And that's been a real theme in the last 2 to 3 years for me, right? Finding the right people to help me do the things that I want to do. So I got a book coach. Her name is Amy Warren, and she's absolutely fantastic. And what I did was learn the process of writing a book. So this writing process takes a long time.
Mhm.
So you need to have that commitment, you need to have that perseverance. I had a few sort of personal challenges this year. I had to take time out of the business, but I still came back to it. So I finished the writing, which is incredibly exciting. We're in editorial rounds now, which I have to be honest is not my love. It's not so
No,
exciting, but
the
has
worst
to be
part.
done. Has to be done, has to be done. And so, again, getting lots of help there, but doing the hard work of like checking all those like that's and whiches and commas and all of that. But we're coming to launch. So we're heading for launch in November. The book is all about becoming a global leader. So for people who are ready to step up and speak up to amplify their impact. And it's all focused around my 4 pillars of communication to help you become a leader. So there is confidence, there's clarity, there's connection. We talked a lot today about connection, and there's challenging conversations. And this is for everybody who's ready to, really step it up, who knows that they're great at what they do, they're expert, they're knowledgeable, but they really need to now unlock their communication to be that person, to speak and communicate like a leader.
And what's the title? Are we allowed to know that yet?
Yeah, so the working title is Become a Global Leader.
Fabulous. And are you doing a physical book launch, an online book launch, or a bit of everything? Or
A bit of everything. So we're working through the details right now, but I think we're going to have both, because obviously I
Mhm.
have both a virtual audience as well as a in-person one. So all of those details I'm working through right now, but certainly there'll be lots of celebrations come November. So we're just working on all the plans now, but I have a link. If anybody wants to sort of be the first to know when it all goes live, I can share the link, and
Brilliant.
hopefully we can put that in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. And just make a note, Victoria, the Business Book Awards. So
Oh,
that will open
yes.
next year. I was really fortunate with my book. I was a finalist in the Business Book Awards back in 2019, I think it was. Um, and it's a really lovely evening, and they get quite a lot of entries. I think they get a few hundred entries, and then they shortlist about 5 or 6 books for each category. So you should definitely put your
Fantastic.
book into that next year. Um, and I also want to talk to you about your podcast because you are a fellow podcaster and you've had a podcast for what, 3 years now?
Yeah, coming up 3 years, which is just
Mm.
unbelievable.
And again, that puts you at the top with podcasting because, I've had my podcast for 4 years and I hadn't realized most people don't get beyond 20 episodes. And I was
Mm,
talking to a podcast expert about it. And she said to me, yeah, most people give up
yeah.
because it takes a lot of resilience, as you know, to run a podcast. So,
Mm.
talk me through your podcast, what it's about, and what sort of guests that you have on, and what was the purpose really behind you starting it?
Yeah. So I think, so first of all, congratulations to you as well for your podcast for 4 years. Again, it is a
I
massive
know.
achievement. And I
I know.
know what it takes to keep it going, to not give up, to just kind of either decide you've got nothing more to say or you just have something else you need to do.
Yeah.
So my podcast is called Cultural Communication Confidence. And I initially started it because I recognize my audience is global.
Mm,
And I recognize that for me to really build conversations, for people to get to know me, to build that sort of like trust factor, and for people to feel my energy and feel if I was the right person for them, podcasting was a brilliant way to do this. And always listened to a lot of podcasts, especially during the COVID years. And been really, again, really wanted to do this, but it felt such a big thing. So once again, lent into support. That time I got a book, I got some help from somebody to really help me launch it and then got going. But of course, that's only the beginning because you've got to have content to bring to the podcast. And so for the first year, I just did solo episodes and they're short, sharp, sort of 20 minutes. You can listen on a commute or as you're traveling or driving somewhere. And they're all about topics to do with uh, global leadership, communication, and cultural intelligence. And I sort of realized after a year that I really want to bring guests in as well, guest experts, other coaches, but also people from the corporate space to share their own global leadership stories and what they have found has been helpful to them on that journey. And so, what I tend to do now is I tend to have sort of one guest every 3 to 4 weeks, and then I have solo episodes as well. But I absolutely love podcasting. I find that it's a great way to share my voice, to speak up,
mm,
for people to hear the things that I've got to say. But like you, I create a video version as well because people like different
mm,
formats, and that's also a great way for my YouTube channel to be on a different channel and sharing, the things that I know about and can help people with. So I think it's a really fantastic format. And I do know lots of people who give up after sort of 10 episodes or they've done it a while and then they take a break and they never really come back to it. But what's always motivated me is the feedback I get.
mm.
And it's not like I get loads and loads of comments, and it's not like I get hundreds of messages in my inbox about it. But when somebody says to me, "Oh, I've been following you for a while and your podcast is so helpful to me. And actually now I want to talk to you about, I don't know, either working together or can I get your help on this?" That's when I realize that's the impact I'm having globally with people I've never even met who are
Mm.
listening to me, who want me to be there to help them with the challenges that they're experiencing. So that's why I really love it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way of being able to connect with your audience and, they can deeply listen to your thoughts because you're in their ear. and
Yeah.
and just kind of get that connection with people. And yeah, I mean, I'm with you on it all. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I will be going to listen to yours. What's your podcast called?
Cultural communication confidence. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And
Yeah.
we'll make sure we put some links to that as well in the show
Thank
notes.
you.
Well, Victoria, it has been absolutely wonderful talking to you today. I'm very excited to see you at the final in October. You've shared lots of golden nuggets today, which is great. And if anyone's listening to this and they need some help with their communication skills, we will make sure that your details are in the show notes so they can go along and connect with you. Best of luck with the book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, Debbie, I really appreciate you inviting me onto the show.
Thank
I've
you.
really enjoyed this conversation and I'm super excited to be a finalist and to join everybody else who's a finalist in October. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And I wish you continued success, Victoria.
Thank you very much, Debbie.
Thank you.